Hello and welcome to part one of two interviews with two of the biggest names in Welsh football. First up, we have the Scotsman who recently guided Connah's Quay Nomads to their first Cymru Premier title. It's Andy Morrison. So Andy, first of all, how does it feel for me to be welcoming you as the manager of the Champions of Wales?
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's great. A lot of hard work. And it's nice to have that title. It's thoroughly deserved. We worked incredibly hard. We were in an incredibly strong position when the season finished, or when it was curtailed early. And it's just nice, because like I say, I think yourself, the work that goes on behind the scenes is huge, by so many different people. And and I think it's just a reward for a lot of hard work for not just this season, for a good few seasons now.
Absolutely. You've definitely been knocking on the door for a few years, I think. And I think everyone in Wales can say, everyone that follows Welsh football is just so delighted to have another club up there that, can take on that for Wales. And we are very, very proud as a nation, I think, of what you've achieved this season. We are going to come back to Welsh football because I'm quite interested to know your thoughts as well on, how it's developed since you've been at Nomads. But we're going to start, we can't have you on and not discuss your playing career, first of all, because I think you could say that was quite successful in itself. You obviously made your Plymouth debut at just 17 years old. I just want to, it seemed, when you look back at it, it seems quite a seamless transition into professional football. But what was it really like? Were there any early setbacks for you?
I don't, I went to Southampton, but I don't think I was emotionally or mature enough really for that at that time. I think I was maybe 13. And it was such an eye-opener, and so done professionally, everything that was there. I was in the same group as Alan Shearer and the Wallace brothers, Matt Letizia, and it was just but it was what I needed at that point in my career. I needed to see the sacrifices, I needed to see the dedication that was needed. I went back and then obviously went into Plymouth as an apprentice and supported Plymouth from the time I arrived in Plymouth at 8 years old. So I had a real strong connection with the club. And obviously came through apprenticeship into being a professional and played many times with the club and had a fantastic period down in Plymouth before I moved on.
And how did that time at Plymouth shape you? What had you brought from Southampton, and how did it shape you as a player? Were you always, the loudest in the dressing room? Were you always destined to be a captain and a leader, or was that something that came a bit later on?
I think when I go back as early as sort of 10 years old, I was a captain of Plymouth Schoolboys and captain of Devon Schoolboys, and it was just the personality really and the character that I was. I was loud, I was demanding even as a youngster. So, every club I went to, eventually, I captained the club in some form. So I guess it was there, those traits from a very, very early age, and an ingrained desire to win. And I think that's infectious, no matter what age you are. If people see that you're willing to go the extra length, how hard you want to work, I think people follow that, and I just think it's probably the natural qualities of a captain.
And were there times, both on and off the pitch, where maybe you felt that people expected you to need to prove yourself as a player?
I was always, my validation really came from my father. It was his seeking approval, acknowledgement that I was doing well. Even when I played for Plymouth, I'd walk into the players' bar at the end of a game and I'd look at him to see, and if he was looking away from me, I would have thought I've had a poor game. And if he was looking straight at me and with a glint in his eye, then I know I'd done well. And I think it's a healthy thing to have, a respect, for whoever your mentor is, whoever that role is, and for me it was my father, and I remember driving back from Southampton as a 13-year-old, and I never spoke all the way back when I was told I wasn't being taken on, and I think it was like a 4.5-hour journey. I never said a word, just sat in the back, just felt like I let my dad down, and I just think that's the characteristics of somebody who's determined and wants to succeed, and that kind of followed me everywhere. Even in my early days at Plymouth, I was a professional footballer and I was playing in the first team, but I was still up at 3 o'clock in the morning, landing fish with my brothers on the fishing boat, and then I'd go into training at 9 o'clock. So, my dad always kept me really grounded, and, it's in my book, one story where we played Brighton away and we were leaving at 8 o'clock, and I'd been landing the fish at 3:30 in the morning, and I'm going back to the flat to go to the game, and I've got no key to get in the flat. So I've ended up having to go to the ground in my wellies and my oilskins, and I had to get some training kit from the kit manager before the manager came in, who would have then seen that I'm obviously been working in the night. So it was quite an adventurous young period for me, do you know, where until I'd actually established myself and my father knew that I had a career in football, I always had to be working at the same time on the boat.
I think that's so important, you know, to command that respect. And I think many people could argue that's one thing that football maybe lacks now, because there are so many easier routes into playing football. But that hard graft is something that really sets you up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great point. And I was actually having this conversation last week with somebody about I think the characteristics of a good competitive man, a winner, I don't think that ever changes. You know, we have fashions, we have trends where things come in and go out. And, you know, I always think there's a lack of urgency from youngsters today. You know, they're not as anxious to do well, you know, but the qualities are still there. And yes, I think that adversity and that toughness, I don't think it's as evident nowadays as it was in my day, and probably a lot before me as well. But I still believe if it's in your heart to be a footballer or whatever profession, the profession you're going into, if that's your dream and that's your desire and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then, you know, I think those qualities are the same right across the board.
Definitely. And then obviously from Plymouth, you then went to Blackburn and played under Kenny Dalglish. I'm quite interested to know, how difficult a time was that for you? Because you only made 5 appearances, didn't you, there? Mm-hmm. How difficult was that for you, going from, you were in the first team at Plymouth and then going to making just 5 appearances in the season? What was that like for you mentally as much as anything?
Really, it was really, really tough. And not only was I going into a squad that was on the up with players at that time who were very good but went on to become great players, Colin Hendry, Henning, Berg, David May, you know, Ian Pearce, who had a fantastic Premier League career, and Patrick Anderson, who went from Blackburn to Barcelona. So these were all centre-halves, and you know, on reflection, and it's easy in hindsight, you know, it was the wrong decision. I also compounded it with a knee injury. I went to Blackburn with a knee injury, and I managed to kind of blag my way through the medical, and I played a game or two, but the knee was too, so I needed to get a knee operation. So that set me back sort of 4 months. So it was really December, you know, before I began to train right and get myself fit. And then an opportunity came. I played in the first team, did really, really well. And we beat Wimbledon 3-0. I had an exceptional game, played in the midweek game in the Cup, and then David May's suspension was up. And David came back and went into the team at Tottenham on the Saturday. And that's the way it was, you know. And, you know, obviously David May went on to play for United. Henning Berg went on to United. Colin Hendry had the career he had. So, you know, on reflection, there was 3 or 4 other options. You know, Leeds, Wolves, Luton at the time had all made bids and offers. And, you know, I think the lure of Blackburn and Kenny Dalglish and the players, it was just too much for me. And having met him and spoke with him, but you know, I think with the right kind of guidance at that time, I would have carried on playing, and I wouldn't have played anyway, obviously, because I need the knee operation, so that would have held me back anyway. But you know, to carry on playing another 30, 35 games the following season would have been what I needed at that time, not to go into that sort of environment where the quality of the players were immense, and they went on to win the title the year after. So, you know, it was a step too much for me.
What do you tell yourself when you're in that position? You've obviously played well enough when you've been given the opportunity, and then you're still dropped when a player comes back from suspension. What do you tell yourself to keep yourself motivated at that point?
I think your desire to keep working hard, keep wanting to prove people wrong. I think if that happens to you on 2 or 3 occasions, then I think you're getting the message. Then really, it's time to move on, and you'll have to look elsewhere. But you know, it was the first time it had happened to me, so get your head down, work doubly hard in training, keep improving. You can't help but improve when you're training with good players, and wait for your next opportunity to come along. And they were very sporadic, the games that I played. It was, I had so many good players ahead of me, and eventually, it came to a point where, the obvious thing was to move on.
And of course, you moved on. You were actually the club record signing, weren't you, for Blackpool under Sam Allardyce? And I think he described you as a horrible, in-your-face kind of centre-back and a complete nutter, is the quote. So, how would you say that's accurate?
I would I, at that time, 100%. Yeah, I can't argue with that at all. I've been called a lot worse as well, so that's not too bad. And I was actually on the way down to Swindon.
Right.
I was going down with Steve McMahon, was the manager there, and I was going down to sign for them. I got a phone call. Blackpool had offered more. I turned around on the M6 and headed straight to Blackpool and sat down with the football director, which was Billy Bingham, and Sam, and signed there and then. Sam told me everything I wanted to know, and I wasn't somebody that had to be sold a club, or persuaded. I was either in or I wasn't. And, once I knew they wanted me, once they made it obvious that I was in their plans and how they were that's enough for me. I didn't need to be persuaded. I didn't need to be shown the new plans for the new stadium and everything. That's just the way I am. I'm either in or I'm out. It's as simple as that.
And I think that mentality as well stems from being a hard worker. You don't want it for the luxury lifestyle or things like that. You just want to do it for the benefit of playing football.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been, I've always had such a passion for football from such a young age. It kind of saved me really when I was directionless in my life, and it gave me something to focus on. And it's what I've always loved doing. And it's never a job, it's never a chore. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be involved in the game. So I think you're very, very fortunate if you have a love for something and it becomes your profession. Then you're doubly rewarded. So it was always that way. If you don't want me and they do, I'm all in. It's as simple as that. And that's how it was at Blackpool. And I had a fantastic period there. I only played about 60 games. But like I've said many times, I'm in the Hall of Fame there, so which I'm incredibly proud of. It's alongside sort of Stanley Matthews and Jimmy Armfield and players, who everyone knows, and to be mentioned in the same breath as them means, again, I did something and I left an impression at Blackpool.
Definitely. And what was your relationship like with Big Sam? For him to describe you using those words, I think I'd say anyway, you need to have a good rapport with a person. Did you have that with him?
I did, yeah. I did. I mean, Sam goes a little bit more into depth in his book, and talks about somebody that perhaps struggled a little bit away from the game. But when I trained, I trained like it was my last training session. I played every game like it was my last game, and it was like a cup final. The intensity that I did, everything football-wise, and Sam understood that and saw it. And away from that, my extracurricular kind of behaviour wasn't great. And like I say, it's been well publicised on many occasions. I don't ever shy away from it. It's quite tough sometimes when you're sort of 21 years since you last had a drink, and then you talk about it, and people tend to think you're talking about yesterday, which is a little bit, I find that a little bit awkward. But, like I say, I've never shied away from it. It was part of my career, my character pushed me and created somebody that wanted to win. But on the flip side of it, it also destroyed, my career in many ways. So, kind of like the same demons that drove me to want to be the best, when they weren't channeled in the right direction, they were very destructive.
I think we often say that I have quite a lot of mental health chats with people. I'm an ambassador for quite a few mental health charities, and it's always the thing. Your mental health can be the thing that drives you to be the best, but it can also be the thing that destructs you. And I think that's something that's common with all of us that have issues like that. It's, it can be the same thing that drives you to want to be the best footballer, to be the most successful and have these ambitions, but that can also be the thing that drives you to destruction.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I had this conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and it's somebody who I respect a lot, and I actually asked that question. Is the same demons that that do destroy you, and you've seen many people commit suicide, and is it the same demons that can push you to climb mountains and achieve things that are almost impossible? And the answer was yes, it is. But finding some sort of peace with them demons is the answer. Eventually for acceptance and channeling them in the right direction, and also making sure that when they do start talking to you, that they're your friend and not your enemy.
Yeah. And what was the environment like back then for something like that? Because I actually spoke to Andy Robinson, who used to play for the Swans, last week about what the environment was like for him with a mental health condition when he played. What was it like in terms of support back when you were at Blackpool? Was there any way you could talk about that, or was it something you just had to deal with in private, kind of?
I think on reflection, I think when you look back, you actually see the darkness, you see the fear, you see those moments, the chronic anxiety and the circling thoughts in the head now. But at that time, you didn't. And it wasn't that you were in denial. There was just no acceptance whatsoever. It's absolute nonsense. So I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to mention it to the physio doctor or nothing. I'm just going to cover it up, put the front on, build the walls, and just get on with it. And so, like I said, even if I'd sat down with somebody and spoke with them at that period, there's no way I could have accepted or even acknowledged that I had something that was maybe slightly fragile about me. There was, and again, it wasn't denial. There was just no acceptance whatsoever. And, we've come a hell of a long way since the mid-90s and in our understanding of things. And there is obviously avenues now for people to speak to, but most of the people who were affected like I would only look back now and think, wow, God, if I'd only known then, if I'd only been able to speak to somebody. But, everyone's journey is different. And thankfully nowadays, there's so many avenues for people to pick up a phone, go to their doctor, speak to somebody within a football club and just say, I'm struggling, I'm really struggling at this moment in time. And then being able to get an avenue, because it was, like I said, I don't even think it was seen as a weakness because there was no acknowledgement then. You just wouldn't go there.
Yeah, it's the awareness, isn't it? I always say, even 5-10 years ago, I wouldn't have openly said, I hear voices in my head. I would never have done that. But now I think people are at a position where they're willing to understand it. Whereas before, I think people were quite willfully ignorant. If I say that now, people are more likely to want to understand how that's the case, or they won't laugh, because 5-10 years ago, the perception would have been completely different if I'd gone, yeah, I hear voices in my head. But now people understand it a bit more, and that empathy is there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. And like I say, with so much more education, and there's the lack of ignorance now is great. And like I say, I think the key is educating people, and having an understanding. And that's right from the first minute you walk into football. You, as a 16, 17-year-old, you're offered avenues, you're offered places you can go if you are struggling.
And just out of interest, is there anything that you do with your players at Nomads? Is there anywhere they can go? I'm sure having someone like you as a mentor, that helps in itself. But is there anything there that they can do if they're struggling?
I think it's a pretty open book. I'd like to think that, with my own acceptance and not acknowledgement really of where I've been, and I openly speak to the players. On many occasions, I've said, before games or during coming up to big games, about fear. Is not courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is actually having them thoughts, those negative, continual, universal thoughts that go around in our head, but being able to see them and then being able to talk to them, or even come and speak to somebody else. I've spoken openly about it on many occasions, and I think the players. And I have had those conversations with players, because there are times when I can look at a player and just see there's something different, just his mannerisms, his body language is just not right. And again, that's good, to be able to see that and be able to speak with a player. And you don't always, get an open, honest answer. But it gives you the opportunity in that conversation to just say, if there's anything you need to speak about, I'm here. Jay's there, Craig, if you want to speak to anyone, and I think it's important to know that there's that avenue, and it's not judged in any way.
Definitely. And I just think knowing that someone is there to speak to them, can make a massive difference, even if they're not quite ready to, just knowing that they have that avenue, that they are able to talk. But just bring it back to your career then. You went from Blackpool to Huddersfield before obviously going to Man City, which is very well documented. They even sent you a message of congratulations, I believe, when you became champions of Wales. That you quickly established yourself again in that squad, and you played a really pivotal role in getting them to where they are now. I think that's fair to say. Is that one of your proudest achievements?
Yes, it is. Because where I was in my career at that time, and the mistakes I'd made along the way, and the mistakes were still being made when I first went to Manchester City. But as I've said, I put the drink down in February, I think 99, and haven't drank since. And very quickly after that, we obviously 4 months down the line, 5 months, we're promoted. We're then into the Championship, and we get promoted again. So life was very rewarding for me for the sacrifices that I'd made at that time. And still now, I think the club acknowledge, the fans especially, they acknowledge the period that they were in, because you've got to remember that the team across the road were doing the treble at the same time. So it was a very difficult time and a period of time to be a Manchester City fan. But the loyalty was incredible. We were sold out every week. The passion that the fans had still for their football club, although it was struggling, was huge in the second division. They stuck with the club, and then you look where we are today. And and I always say I think it's just reward for the loyalty and what they showed at those really, really tough times, because they were tough, and they deserve everything they're getting at this moment in time.
But I think you're still regarded, aren't you, as one of their greatest captains. And I think everything you've just described about the fans, their loyalty, their passion, are things that you demonstrate on the pitch.
Yeah, I think we had a bunch of players, if I think back, Richard Edgehill, I was born, as a City fan, and came through the academy, and there was other players there that had come through the academy. There was good players who had come into the club. There was senior players, so the timing was right for me at that moment in my career. Such a good manager, good coaches, good players, and just lacking something. There was just something slightly missing, and maybe I was that little piece in the jigsaw that they needed at that time to bring it together. And as I say, the fans now, I still work at the club as an ambassador on match days, and I still represent the club on functions when I'm asked to do so. I'm very lucky in that area, considering where the club are now and the history they've had over the last decade. It's been remarkable. But there's still a warmth for that squad and that team, who turned, which was a huge ship in Manchester City, which was going in the wrong direction, to turn it around and then do back-to-back promotions was remarkable. And the manager is loved by the fans, and the players from that period as well are always held in great esteem.
Definitely. And I was going to say, you show that passion. And I remember there was a game, this is just completely off the track, but there was a game at Cardiff Met's ground a few seasons ago, and I first started working for them. And you told Chris Wilder to get in the wall. And I just turned to the person next to me and said, if Andy Morrison told me to get in the wall, I'd actually get in a brick wall for him. Because you just have that. If you say something, you listen.
Yes, that's nice of you to say. I think the players know me, and I think people who know me away from football would probably say a slightly different character. But on match days and training days, it's my life, and I can't sugar tint anything. People have to understand the importance of every small detail, and I think your voice, I think your body language and your eyes let other people around you know the importance, because there has been times where I haven't quite had that same intensity, and the players will definitely pick up on it, and they will drop off 10% if they feel that I'm not in the same zone as they are. So I'm very fortunate. I've got a fantastic group of lads, and thankfully they know me in football and out of football.
Well, you nearly had a very different group of lads before you joined Connah's Quay Nomads. In 2010, you were announced as the manager of the Seychelles national team, and we can't. As soon as I read about that fact, we couldn't just ignore it. So, what do you remember about that? Obviously, it wasn't you, but what do you remember about that time?
Well, it was a phone call I got from a paper, from the National, I think it was a Daily Mail, just saying, was I aware of this? The story sort of came from over in that area of the world, and then it kind of grew a little bit, and then I was being asked if I was the manager. I think it was Seychelles, and I remember joking at the time, I won't deny it. I'll see how successful he is, and if he does well, I'll stick it on my CV. And yeah, it was somebody just apparently claiming to be me, used my kind of like history of football in my career to get the job, and got it as well. So fair play to him.
But luckily, it didn't affect you because he didn't last very long at all there. Because I think they realised quite quickly that he wasn't you and he wasn't the man for the job. So at least it didn't impact your career.
No, it didn't. It didn't. It would have been a nice little stint, though, wouldn't it? Going across there for a few months.
And then obviously you joined Connah's Quay Nomads. I'm just interested to know, did you know much about the Welsh League before you joined? Because there is kind of still, as much as we all try to work to eradicate it, I think there is still that stigma sometimes about the Welsh Leagues, which is completely nonsensical. But that is still, what were you told about the league before you joined?
Well, when I originally came with Andy Priest to Airbus, and I'll be honest, I didn't know. I was fixated on the football in the northwest, the non-league scene, so I didn't know very, very, very little about the Welsh League. We saw an opportunity. We spoke with Airbus, and they had ambitions and plans and where they wanted to go, and we took the job. You know, it was a lot more secure than we were in at the time. We were at Northwich, and we were doing great. Again, we'd had a fantastic cup run the year before, beat Charlton in the first round of the cup. And we were pushing for a promotion with Chester to get out of the league, so the success was already there. But you know, the club folded very soon afterwards, so you know, we made the right decision. Airbus was a great opportunity. We managed to bring a lot of the players across that were playing for us at that time. And you know, to be perfectly honest with you, we absolutely ripped it up for 3 years. You know, we were miles away from TNS. We were nowhere near them. But the next best thing was to come second. And you know, we went from a team that were always in the bottom 3 or 4, had never beaten a top 6 team, to finishing second in the league in our first full season, and the next 2 seasons as well. So we had 3 back-to-back European campaigns, and then it really became my time to move on. You know, I knew what I brought to the table. I knew what part I played in that success, and I always believed I could carry on and do it, you know, as leading the ship rather than being an assistant. And the Connah's Quay job came along. The timing again was right, as you always need in life. You need things to fall right for you. You need an element of good fortune and luck. There was a lot of very good players, an ambitious chairman, a club that knew where they wanted to go. And, you know, when I got the opportunity, got the interview and got the job. And we kicked on from there, and we've done very, very well since. And there was a lot of good things in place, though, when I came in. You know, it was, yes, they were bottom of the league. Everyone knows that. But, you know, when you've got George Horan and Paul Linwood and Les Davis, you know, Jamie Crowther, there's some exceptional players there. So I just needed to give them a bit of guidance, add a little bit more intensity in all areas of the club, and you know, we kicked on from there, and we haven't never looked back since.
And how much has not just Connah's Quay Nomads, but the Welsh League developed since you've been at the Nomads? How much have you seen, you know, the interest in the game improve? I think we see, you know, different outlets are now covering it. They're all interested in Welsh football. How much has that changed since you've been there?
I think it's the standard has improved year on year. I always go back to, I think the quality of the managers and the coaches, I think, is exceptional. You know, through the Welsh Trust normally, the coaching education area of Wales is phenomenal, as good as anything in the world. And we've all done our pro license, and you know, there's incredibly bright, young, forward-thinking managers and senior managers who have had you know, decades of success. And so I believe that maybe the players the budgets and all that maybe aren't on a par with some of the conference or even to the Conference North. But I believe the coaching, I think the management, and I think the technical side of things is way ahead of the rest of it, and it has improved. You know, the surfaces obviously with the 3Gs, which aren't always my cup of tea, but you know they allow you to play in all kinds of weather, and they give you a surface that is neutral for everyone, and the gates have improved. You know, it is a hard sell. I understand how difficult that is. You know, with football just continually thrown down your throats from all angles. You know, on a Saturday afternoon or a Friday evening to go and watch your local team when it's a bit cold and fresh, and maybe Manchester United are on the television that evening, or the next day there's a couple of games. It really is difficult in that area to sell football. But I think what we did last season, I think plays a huge part in it being progressive, because, as I've always said, if there's no competition, there is no interest at whatever level of football. It dies away. And with ourselves now challenging, you know, Val have obviously made again some great signings. Barry look as if they're getting stronger. There's other clubs that are forward thinking. I think the competition is great now. It's certainly improved, and you know everything's come a bit closer together now. So it gives a general interest to people. You know, if they're doing really well down at Carmarthen or Barry and Connah's Quay are coming out, there's got to be a competitive edge for anyone to have an interest in it. And I believe that's the big change for me is now it's closer. All the teams now have a chance of pushing for the top six, and especially now maybe 4 or 5 clubs have a chance of winning the league.
And I think that's one of the most important things with you winning the league this season is, you know, I can be wearing my Cardiff Met shirt and people will ask me what division they play in, and then the answer will always be, oh, that's the one TNS win every year. And that's always been the way it is, and it's so infuriating. But that's just, you know, that's just the way the league has been perceived for many, many years. So what you've done is going to change the perception of Welsh football, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you go to Scotland, then obviously people will know of TNS, but they'll also know Connah's Quay now.
Yeah.
With us reaching the the Scottish Challenge Cup final, and then obviously beating Kilmarnock last year. You know, everyone up there now who has an interest in football knows Connah's Quay. They know they play in the Welsh League, and you know those results echo across the whole pyramid really when a result is like that and how well we've done. And TNS have had some good results in Europe as well. And it just reflects good for the league, you know, that a Welsh Premier League team are able to go and beat a top Scottish Premier League team. It just speaks great volumes for the league and shows how far we've come. And I think, as you said, you know, it's so important that there is other names and other people. You know, if you look at the history of Barry over the years, and Bangor have had great periods, and it's so important for me that your Bangors and your Royals get back into that top Welsh Premier League, because these are huge clubs. You know, you look at what Connah have brought, and I always, every time I go to Carmarthen down there, I always think, you know, that could be such a hotbed of football, and there's such a, you know, because they're crying out for a team that would go and lead and push on in the Welsh Premier League. And these top teams have to be back in the league eventually, you know, and for me, they can't come quick enough. We put massive demands on the players, you know, and expectations, and they've bought into it. You know, last year, you know, we've seen the improvements in not just physically but also mentally in the players that have come into the full-time program. They bought into it and understand the sacrifices and the lengths that you have to go to. There is no shortcuts to success. And if it is successful, it won't be longevity. You know, the success comes from hard work, continually working hard, also working sensibly as well. You know, it's not just about touring up and down the land, and you know, you've got to find a structured way to use your time right. And we think we have. We've got the balance right, and you know, and I expect those players to kick on again this year. I really do. I expect to see a big improvement in our younger players that played last year. I think they can kick on now for the next 3 or 4 seasons, because we've got a good group who are between sort of 21 and 24. We've got senior players as well who are just a credit to the football club. So right across the board, you know, I think we're in a really healthy position.
Definitely. And do you think that maybe clubs in the English pyramid could utilise the Welsh Premier League more, or the Cymru Premier even more than they do? You see players like Ben Cabango coming from Swansea, going to TNS. Do you think more could use it as a system to improve their players? Because like you said, the coaching is fantastic. The standard of football is great. Are you surprised that not more clubs use it?
Well, I don't think we're there to benefit any other team.
Yeah.
You know, we're there in our own rights, and you know, we're not looking for any favours of any other clubs. You know, if a young player comes into the Welsh Premier League, he has to be very good. It's very difficult for young centre halves, I think, or even young strikers to come in because they haven't really learnt their trade. You know, they've not been beat up, they've not been dominated and bullied. So, you know, I've seen centre halves come in and they come up against a Les Davis, or in the past a Rhys Griffiths, and you know, they look very, very average because they don't understand the game. So, yes, I think you know, there's an avenue for teams to sort of bed their players in and understand the game, but it's certainly not them doing us a favour. It's more the Welsh League doing them a favour by allowing players to see what it means on a match day to lose a game of football, and you know, and the disaster that comes with that, because you know, it's an internal sort of like investigation within the club. If we drop points, we have to look at it and see why. You know, and I think when they've been in academies, maybe they don't feel that each week, you know, but when it's your life and it's your, you know, it's your livelihood, it's a great learning curve for young players.
And just, you know, you mentioned Bala have signed some great players, which they have, but you've signed Aaron Edwards as well, which I think is the signing of the summer myself. You must be incredibly happy to have him on board.
Yeah, he's a player I've respected for many, many seasons. You know, I made a comment a couple of seasons ago during the game to him, and he rammed it down my throat by flicking the ball around the corner and then banging one in the top corner from 30 yards out, and then let me know, like, you know. So this is somebody I've always respected, somebody who is a ferocious competitor, wants to win. Every single game I've seen him play, he plays like it's his last game and his most important game. And we're delighted to get him on board. You know, we did everything we could. We told him how important it was, you know, for us going forward, that he'd be part of our group. You know, we also brought in Quay, you know, who was at Dundee last year, and he's cemented down for the season. You know, Jamie Insel. And, you know, we've got some really, really good players, and we've got a very good, healthy balance to the squad. And, you know, we're champing at the bit to get back training and playing, because, you know, the uncertainty still at the moment makes it so difficult. You know, yes, it was great that the season was finished when it was, and it was the right decision to be made. But I was also mindful at that point of, where are we going with this? You know, when are we going to get back? When is football going to look like it did, you know, back sort of January, February, before all this kicked in? You know, when is that? And at the moment, we're still not clear, and, you know, we're heading towards July.
And just finally on that, you know, how do you look at your European prep even? You know, how do you even plan that? Because remember last season, Cardiff Met were back in training in June. So, you know, how do you even prepare for that at the moment?
The only preparation we can have is a template in place of a 6-week training program heading towards that first game in Europe. You know, I think if we get that 6 weeks, whenever that comes, whether it's August, middle of July, or heaven help us, September, at least we'll be able to plan. You know, the players are monitored. You know, we have their weights every single week now, so we know that nobody's putting weights on. They're bright boys anyway, and I think the world has changed, as we spoke about earlier on. You know, I think these lads are so much more aware of their own fitness levels. You know, and they do just go for a run. You know, they're more likely to have a protein shake in their hand these days than have a pint at the weekends. You know, which is great. It's great, and you know, so we know they're looking after themselves. The weights are right. You know, I speak to them at least twice a week, every player. And as long as we can get that sort of 6-week program that we know we can start from day one and build in slowly, integrate the training, and then obviously bring some games in, and then hopefully we're ready to go in that first game. Well, not hopefully, we will be ready to go in that first game in Europe when it comes along.
Perfect, thank you very much. But one thing I will say, you can speak for yourselves when it comes to weight, because it's a very different story here, that's for certain. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's all for now. Part 2 with Magic Daps Lee Trundle coming soon.